Right, training thresholds and zones. So that's what we're going to look at today. To establish your training zone, you have to find out your maximum heart rate. So it has to be decided. How do we find that out? Some of you might already know, 220 minus your age. So it's the same for everybody. So it could be 220 minus 15. If you're a 40-year-old, it could be 220 minus 40. To gain aerobic fitness, the exercise should be maintained between 60 and 80% of your maximum heart rate. For example, a 20-year-old, his maximum heart rate would be 220 minus his age. So 220 minus 20, which equals 200. Therefore, his aerobic training threshold would be 60% of 200, which equals 120. So if he gets up to a heart rate of 120 or over, so 123, 124, 130, he's in his aerobic training threshold, which is when he's using oxygen. He's kind of doing his cardio, okay? A long, gentle jog would be an example of that. If he goes to 80%, which would be 80% of 200, 160, he then hits his anaerobic training threshold. So if his heart rate goes above 160, he's working harder. He's no longer using as much oxygen, and he's using more of his muscles and different energy systems. It's anaerobic training threshold, okay? So instead of a gentle jog, it'd be more of a sprint. Aerobic threshold, so the 60%, is the level of exercise where the intensity is sufficient to produce a training effect. So anything below 60%, if your heart rate, 20-year-old's heart rate was only 80, 90, or 100, the intensity wouldn't be sufficient enough to produce a training effect. Okay, so you've got to get over that 60% to make it effective. Anaerobic threshold is the point where the aerobic mechanics become overloaded and anaerobic metabolism begins to play a major role. So like I said, your intensity's gone up, your heart rate's beating faster. Once it gets over 160, so 165, 170, then you're in your anaerobic training threshold. Your aerobic threshold, the aerobic mechanics can no longer support you. So you start to use your anaerobic threshold, anaerobic metabolism. So the thresholds do vary marginally. So it might not be exactly 60% of 120, it might be 123, might be a bit less, okay? The training zone between the thresholds, so between 60 and 80% of your maximum heart rate, is known as the aerobic training zone. And exercising in the zone above is the anaerobic training threshold, okay? Plus 80% maximum heart rate, this means you're in the anaerobic training zone. Here's a graph to kind of make it a little bit more simpler. So we've got the age across the bottom, and you've got heart rates up both sides, up that side and up that side. So if we take the 20-year-old, go up, it's a little bit off, but 120 would be his anaerobic training threshold. So this line going down here is the threshold. Okay, so for the 20-year-old, he has to get over 120 beats per minute to break in the aerobic zone. Okay, aerobic threshold, sorry, not the anaerobic threshold. So that's his 60 to 80%. Once the 20-year-old's heart rate starts going up, 140, 160. As it hits 160, he hits the anaerobic training threshold. So the line going up and down here. Once he breaks through that, if his heart rate's 164, 165, he's then in the anaerobic training zone, so he's working harder, okay? And as it goes up, he gets the maximum effort and maximum heart rate. So if we took a 40-year-old, for example, look, as it goes up, his aerobic training threshold is closer to 100. So as his heart rate reaches 100, he's already hitting the aerobic training threshold because he's older. Okay. Same with the anaerobic training threshold. So it would that's why as you get older, your maximum heart rate gets lower, and it's easier for you to get to your aerobic training threshold. You don't have to work as hard. Another graph. So this graph shows how heart rate can be used to establish training thresholds. If we start from the bottom, your resting heart rate shown by G, this line here. So this person has a resting heart rate of just under 80. F is represented for the no improvement zone. So if his heart rate is below 130 and above his resting heart rate, he's not improving here, he's not training, he's just going day-to-day business, okay? E is then his aerobic training threshold, which on this is 130 beats. So once he breaks through that, he's into D, this zone, which is his aerobic training zone, okay? Yeah. So that's when he's doing his cardio, he's going for a gentle jog. Maybe a marathon runner would stay at this pace and keep his heart rate between 60 and 80%. C then would be his anaerobic training threshold. So it's nearly 170 beats per minute. Once he breaks through that, he's working a bit more intensely. So he's not using oxygen as much, he's using his anaerobic energy system, and he breaks into B, which is his anaerobic training zone. And then finally A, his maximum heart rate is close to 110, okay? So all I want you to do is complete the worksheet on training zones after watching this video.